butcher's building blocks. Let's build something beautiful today. We're standing in front of my jet lathe for a reason. Today we're going to be using it. Went to one of our local lumber mills and they usually have pine borer beetle timber that's been killed and they've cut it up. The nice thing about the timber mill is these are true 4x4s. They're not store-bought that are less than 4x4s. So start out with a nice solid 4x4 piece. I bought an 8-foot section, cut it up into 12 inches, 10 inches, and 8-inch lengths. We're going to take these and we're going to turn out some magnificent looking Christmas trees that are really pretty simple and easy for you to do. So stick around with me and let's get on the lathe and start this project. I found the center of my 4x4s, which is pretty easy since it's a square. Line them up on my lathe. First section we're going to do is just turn this down into a round cylinder. Our 4x4 is now rounded down, a nice cylinder. We take our calipers and just get them to pass over the edge. We can see that rounded down, it is 3 3/4 of an inch. Now your cylinders can be any size. That just happens to be what mine were when they get done. You need to pick an end that you want to be the top of the tree and an end you want to be the bottom of the tree. I generally pick this end to be the top of the tree because I can get the tip of the tree down to a smaller portion before you have to worry about it hitting the stock. We have this piece here that is much wider than the top and you have to worry about catching your tools into it. So I usually make that end my base, make this end my top, but you can do it either way depending on how you feel comfortable. For the start of my Christmas trees, we need to have some type of a base. I allot 3/4 of an inch for my base stand, and then I give it a 1/2 inch gap before I start into the actual tree portion. Let's cut this in first and then we'll measure out the rest of our tree. In order to carve this slot, I'm going to use my 1/8 inch parting tool. The depth doesn't really matter. Cut it down to what you feel looks kind of like what a Christmas tree would be sitting in a stand. Don't cut too far, because if you cut it to too small of a diameter, you risk snapping it off as you're finishing off your tree. That looks like a good diameter. Let's get our calipers down in here. So the diameter of that tree base is 1.5 inches. Next thing I'm going to do is straighten out this back plate here. Since this is what's going to be sitting on the table or mantelpiece, it needs to be flush. It needs to be perpendicular to the tree so the tree doesn't fall over. Now that we have our base cut to the dimensions that we want, we need to taper this so that the top is where our Christmas tree is going to be. For that, I just start at this end and start cutting away and then gradually move my rest in until I can get a nice tapered angle from top to bottom. that we have our conical taper on here, it's time to put the individual bow markings in, I'll call them. I like to have my first one at 1 3/4, the second one at 1 1/2, and the third one at 1 1/4. That gives us a nice tapering in size. This fourth one is at 1, and then that'll be the top, and of course we'll cut it a little bit short about there so we don't hit the center spindle. Now that we've made our marks, let's make a line all the way around so that we can see them. Now we'll take our small parting tool and part those lines in so that we know where to taper the rest of the tree. Now that we've parted our lines in, these lines aren't to full depth. I'm going to start now and cut these all at an angle so that it looks like a tree bough. Okay, time to switch to my smaller rest so that I can get a bit closer to it and hold that angle a little bit better. So we're now down to the bottom of the part on this one. I'm just going to move up and sequentially do the rest of them. Well, I tried to push it a little too far with my skew angle, and it caught and came back and took a really big gouge out of that. So I'm just going to continue with this piece and cut this off and make this section the top. I'm not the best lathe person in the world. I should have known better, but just tried to push it a little bit too much. Okay, I've cleaned up the top gouge that I took out. I need a little more shape adjustment to make this one look smaller than that one. But I'm going to take my sandpaper now and clean up some of these edges to see exactly what I have. So I've reshaped my tree to account for the big divot I took out here. Narrowed this one, and brought these all back in. The only thing left is to sand them down to get rid of the rough edges. Okay, I finished sanding the edges off now. And this is what it looks like. The angles aren't important as long as they look good to you. The depth of the cuts here, again, you can make them as deep as you want. Just be careful, don't you go too deep and weaken your tree. I'll cut this tip off and then we'll move on to the next one. These are the 3 Christmas trees that we carved. Altogether, takes maybe an hour at the most for each one, probably more like 45 minutes to carve them, spray paint them with lacquer, and give the base a black coat. All in all, they're pretty easy, but a very nice Christmas gift.